What to me is so important is that listening is the truest form of love. When you listen to someone, you validate their life.
This is Robert Comstock. Some people seem to spend their lives waiting until they feel ready. Robert Comstock never did. From designing leather jackets in South America to selling high-end menswear all over the world, Robert's life has been shaped by a simple willingness to say yes before he exactly knew how everything would work out. But as you'll hear, this isn't really a story about business. It's a story about the people who believed in him, the lessons he learned from a remarkable father, and why some of life's greatest opportunities begin with a little curiosity and a lot of faith. This is the Grandpa Channel. I'm Rivers. And this is what life taught Robert Comstock the hard way. Welcome to the Grandpa Channel. I'm Steve Harris. My friends call me Steve, or you can call me Rivers, which is what my grandkids call me. And we have an incredibly fascinating guest, Rob Comstock. Describe the arc of going from Pocatello to the fashion industry in New York City. And I'm really fascinated to hear the story. Tell me about it.
I don't think you have long enough time on your podcast, Steve. But I remember when I was in school and in university, I always wanted a leather jacket, right? And I finished school. I went back to New York and I was interviewing with Citibank and Bank of America. And I thought to go into international banking. My father was a banker. But the day before my interview, I understand I'm right out of school, right? And I go into a store called Bloomingdale's, right? And so I see on the rack these coats that said made in Uruguay. Well, I had been in Uruguay on a mission. And I thought, and they were leather jackets. I thought, gosh, I could do that. Right. So the next day I had 5 very intensive interviews. As I got to the 5th one, walk into this guy's office. He was probably 32, 33 years of age. And he says, I notice on your resume, you don't have your MBA yet. I said, you're right. I said, I thought I'd take a leave of absence once I start working, or maybe work and go for it at nighttime. And he asked a few more questions and he said, there's something that bothers me about you in all these interviews. I said, I'm sorry. And I thought for a while he was trying to psych me out, right? And he said, you're entirely too confident. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't mean to come across that way. I said, I've just been around banks. And he said, well, how's that possible? So I explained what my father did. He said, let me tell you something about those little banks, or those little cities. He said, I could take a bank like your father's and have it running better in 3 months' time with all my experience at Citi. And I looked at him and I thought, someday he or the guy sitting in his chair, or the length of my hair or the color of the tie, that's going to be the reason why I don't go further. So I thank you for the interview. I literally walked out of his office, went to a guy by the name of Steve, who was a correspondent banker who I'd met. Said, Steve, can I borrow your phone? He said, sure. So I called the Uruguayan embassy because I'd just seen those coats the day before. And I asked if I could come down to meet the ambassador from Uruguay. They said, yeah, come on down. So I walked out of the bank. My only claim to have things work out is because I'm mercifully free from the ravages of intelligence, right? So I went out, caught a cab down to Battery Place, and 5 minutes later, I'm sitting with the head lead consulate of Uruguay. I said, I want to go down, make leather jackets in your country. So he set me up for an interview with the head general of exportation. I flew home to Boise, sat down with my dad. My dad said, well, Sonny, how'd the interviews go? I said, Dad, I don't think I want to be a banker. I want to start my own business. So on New Year's Day, 1976, I jumped on an airplane. Guy sits next to me on the plane, and he said, what are you doing down here? I explained. He said, you have a business card? I said, no, I don't have a business card. He said, listen, he said, I'm with the American Embassy. And I work with new businesses just getting started. He said, if you need some help, give me a call. He gave me his card. I said, thank you. Well, the next day I have like 3 major factories to visit. And the first factory I go to, you never forget these things. His name was Mauricio Bloomberg. But he walked in, he said, unless you can give me 1,000 units a month and a year's notice in advance, we can't work together. And I said, well, I guess we can't work together, right? I went to the next interview, they were all the same. I went back to my hotel room, and it was this drizzly day, rainy day. And I thought, I'm not going anywhere. And then I remembered this guy on the airplane, right? So I pulled that card out. I dialed the phone. He said, yeah, come on down. Went down to the embassy, and he set me up for an interview with a company called Del Bono y Pena. And he said, this has been a tannery for 50 years, but they're just starting their own leather factory. So because they're just getting started, maybe they'll work with you. So I went out and I met with Dr. Carlos Jose Pena, who was the owner of the factory. And for some reason, he just liked me, right? And I spoke his language. And after a while, you're going to do fine, kid. I'm going to help you. I put a couple of jackets together, went back home, and my parents' garage became my world headquarters. I built racks when I got my first products in, but I'm leaving one part out. I had to go to a show. I said, Pop, I've got a chance to go to the New York show. He says, you make your decision.
Really?
So as I was hanging the phone up, I thought, I cannot go through the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if. So I jumped on a plane, fly to New York, and that particular show, I opened up Bloomingdale's. And then the very next show I did, the guy walked into my room, and he sat down, he started writing these order forms. I thought, gosh, this will be a good order, right? And he said, thank you very much. His name was Kenny Rodriguez. I'll never forget it. I looked at my order. He almost gave me $1 million of an order.
Gosh, really?
And for a minute, I'm bouncing off the ceiling, so excited. And I thought, wait a minute, I don't have the credit to build $1 million worth of product. How am I going to get this done? So I called Chichi Pena down in Uruguay, right? And Chichi said, Robert, listen, I'm coming back up to New York in a week. Just come see me. I said, okay. So I fly from Boise. I get to New York. He's staying at one of the nicest grand hotels, right at the Plaza Hotel, Central Park South. And we walk in and have lunch, and he orders this great big customary Uruguayan Argentina big steak. I think I ordered milk toast. I was so nervous. And he said, Robert, so tell me what you've got to talk about. I said, well, Chichi, I have good news and bad news. He said, I've already heard the good news. I know you did about $1 million. What's the bad news? I said, Chichi, I can't pay for it. And he said, it's funny, I almost get choked up telling this part of it, but he just said, Rob, he said, I've known you for a year now. You spent Christmas in my home. He said, I will ship everything to you on open account, which he did. And that was my start.
I love that story, but I got to tell you, I have a potential kind of motto for you. Sure, I can do that. Is this an attitude that you've had your entire life? How did you get this?
Well, so I paid some very expensive consultants at one time to tell me what they thought of my business. And they said, yeah, your approach is ready, fire, aim. So that's probably been a good part of my motto. And I certainly have had plenty of business challenges and life challenges like you and many of your listeners. But I think that your ability to believe in yourself and your ability to know that your angels in your life come from every single religion, every single ism, every country, that's where the angels come into your life, those that bless you and help you out, like Chichi Pena did with me. So I've had such wonderful help from people along the way, and it's been a tremendous journey for sure. It is a tremendous journey. It's ongoing.
Here's kind of a broad question, and I'll follow it up with maybe a little bit more narrow of a question after I give you a chance to answer it. But what has life taught you the hard way, Rob?
I think that life's hard. Life is hard. That's what it's taught me. But there are so many that have it harder.
How many years did you live in New York City?
All told, probably about 20 years.
And so the question I have is, what did New York City in particular, and be particular about this, what lessons did you walk away from New York City?
Well, that's an easy one, Steve.
Okay.
The original plan, I was married. We had 2 little boys, and one was 1, the other one was 3.5. And we decided, why don't we go back to New York for 5 months? I was breaking with a new collection, going to open a new showroom. And she was modeling. She had the Chanel Allure campaign worldwide. So she was at all the bus stops. I'd see her in Japan. I mean, she was everywhere, right? And I said, why don't we go back for 5 months? And because she always wanted to act, I said, let's get you an acting coach. And an agent. So we did that. And after about 4 months, I was informed that we were going to be getting a divorce. And it just devastated me. And I stayed. Then the 5 months came due, and I stayed trying to keep the family together. And at 6 months and one day, I was informed by Mayor Giuliani's divorce attorney that New York had residency and I couldn't take my boys back to Idaho. So that's the reason why I was there for that many years. It was such a difficult time because that's just when, I was in Bergdorf Goodman and all these great stores. And all of a sudden it's upside down and I became a full-time dad. And I stepped away from that. When I say full-time, that's not fair to my ex-wife, who's a very good person, by the way. That's not fair to her because we had joint custody. I'd have them 1 week, she'd have them the next. But I did learn that if I became a baseball coach, I could even have them more than my share. My littlest one, when a year old, I'd be holding him and having a phone call with the buyers at Bergdorf, hoping that he didn't wake up and start crying when I'm on these phone calls, right? Yeah. I mean, but what I learned was I'd meet other single fathers and they'd start talking about quality time, right? And they said, quality time, take my kids to a Rangers game or I take my kids to a Yankee game and we have quality moments together. Well, we certainly did those things, the boys and I, but what I really learned that quality time is when they'd had a terrible, tough day at school and someone had hurt their feelings or anything in life had gone not the way they'd planned. And when I was there to be able to listen, that was quality time. And what I learned and what to me is so important is that listening is the truest form of love. When you listen to someone, you validate their life. You stop being centering you and you're saying how important you are to me. And I'm not a good listener because I'm super A-type personality. I know I can climb any mountain, I can do anything. And then I get knocked down to my knees on something. I go, man, I got to listen. I got to listen upwards and sideways and all around, right? Mm-hmm. So my point was that those moments are probably what New York taught me, but what I had the opportunity to do, and any single father, any single mother would have the same opportunity, was when it wasn't my week, there were days when I'd sit on the couch in my apartment and just bawl because I missed them so badly. I missed my wife. I mean, the whole thing was just the worst ever. And then I realized, I thought, I can sit here and cry, or I can start thinking about what we're going to do next week to make it a spectacular week. And I was coming home one night from work, and that happened to me. I was mad. I thought, I was maybe a block away from reaching the apartment. I thought, I'm going to walk in that door. They're going to meet two little boys, and I can make this the most fun night ever that we'll remember, or I could just be a grouch. And so there was those moments, what we have when the difficulties and those hurtful challenges come to us, and they're always external typically. It's something you had unplanned and all of a sudden you get challenged with it. So we have two choices. One is to become bitter, or the other one is to say, wait a minute, this is my chance to learn empathy. This is my chance not to judge somebody else. And what you do, if you open up to that, what you learn in time and you ponder the fact that I can't judge any, because the way I grew up, the parenting I had, the circumstances, everything in my life that causes me to judge for me, individuals who I would judge didn't have those same set of circumstances. And so when I would say, how could someone do this in that way? I have no idea. And as you know, and I'm certain that's why you've started your channel here. It's when you learn to not judge and to forgive, that all that weight comes off your shoulder. And when you get spiritual about it and you think about the fact we're meant to have these challenges for sure. And like I say, we can choose to be bitter. We can choose to have empathy. We can also choose to stop thinking of that immediate hurt that's going to crush us, or that business deal is not going to come through next week. If it doesn't come through, I'm going to lose my house. All those instantaneous things that we're facing in such a narrow-sighted way, which we're meant to. We've got to have those challenges. We know it. But if we stop for a second and we ponder on Christ and we think about what did he go through? How did he do it? In some small way, this issue I'm dealing with at the moment can put me on his team. In some small way, I can try to fathom what he went through. And then all of a sudden, instead of having the short-sighted, if this doesn't happen by the end of the month, I put it into an eternal perspective. And I go, gosh, this problem right now, I'm not going to be thinking about it down in the eternities. So how big is it compared to what my whole life is really, the essence of my life is truly about? How blessed I am.
If you were a 28-year-old that was listening to this and kind of interested, for instance, in the idea of how you came up with your sense and all of the things and places you've lived, what do you hope that somebody listening to you right now would pull away?
Whenever you set your mind on something, if you have a desire, if I'm 28 years old, and if I have a desire to do this business or to climb this mountain, no matter what you set your goals on in life, I'm going to be the best at this. You're going to have a caring relative or a friend say, you can't do that.
Mm.
And I don't care if you feel you're just the best dressed guy in the world. If someone comes walking up the street and in a t-shirt and hardly any else, and they say, that's the ugliest tie I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Next time you get to a mirror, you're going to check that tie out.
Sure you are.
Right?
Yeah.
So I guess my thought is you've already been successful because you went for it. And you went for it when others around you, or maybe you yourself had that self-doubt. So it's not becoming known for something, or it's not that. It's the fact that you've already been successful because you went after it. But it's the fact that you threw your hat in the ring and said, I'm going to go for this now. That's what is the one thing you don't want to give up. Don't let anybody dissuade you from what you, and you can come out of a raw, you could hear a great speaker sometime and come out feeling like $1 million, and it's going to be a day later. You're going to be down in one of your slopes again. So that's why I say it really is up to the individual. But my request would be, not as a lesson, but my request would be that if you really believe in it intrinsically, if it's really important to you, then get after it. But it's got to be important to you. It's got to mean something. So when you get through those lean times, you hang in there. Otherwise, you'll walk away from it.
That's a great point. I just think that we could spend more time actively getting to know people, and that there are these wonderful rewards that come from speaking and talking about kind of deep things. So here's my question for you. And I'd like you to maybe have a couple of examples. Have you felt the hand of God in your life as you've been going through and, having highlights and lowlights and all the stuff in between? But have you felt that God has been involved in your life?
I certainly have, but I'm not one of those types of persons who prays for everything, right? I didn't, which woman should I marry? Maybe I should have prayed. I'm kidding. No, I just, my sister one time, she'll say, Robbie, why did that little boy get hit by that car? Why was he needed home? I go, Christina, I think he just crossed the road at the wrong time. Life is real out there. I've seen people in terrible circumstances that didn't deserve it whatsoever. What lesson was there for them to learn as they were starving to death and died? I don't know what that lesson was. I guess the feeling I've felt is that there have been moments where I just felt like I was going to lose everything with my business. And somewhere deep down, I knew I wouldn't. And at that moment, I thank God for having the DNA that I have. I don't know why I have it, because it'd be just as easily I wouldn't, right? So I think it's very important for me to concentrate and think about the times when I felt him, because I know there's been many times when it was there and I didn't look for it. I'm just muttering through my problem. I guess it's been those times when I do get so humbled that I say the words in a private room by myself, I can't do this. I can't go any further. I need help. And those moments to me become some of the most important moments, because I find I do need support. I do need help. I've had moments where I knew something was about to happen and it happened. And I don't talk about those experiences, right? but I've had moments where I had true revelations and exactly what I saw was exactly what came to be. But they weren't, if you will, testimony building. It's not those moments that go boom, it's that day to day, keep getting up and going after it, finally understanding that you're so lucky to have what you have. And I'm not a master at it. I have all my challenges, but I do know that I'm loved. I do know that I love him. And sometimes that's even more of a strength to me because I love him so much.
Why do you love God, Rob? I'd be curious is it based on experiences? Is it a feeling? Your love for God, is that something that's always been there? Is that intrinsic in all of our DNA? Or I know people who do not love God and do not believe that God exists, but why do you love God?
What's interesting, sometimes it's those people that don't believe in God, but live such beautiful lives that I'm most impressed with, you can be in any ism, but, give me a good Catholic that goes to Mass every morning, I'm impressed, right? Sometimes I wonder why my beliefs have been more easy to come by, and I don't know the answer to that. I feel happy that they are.
It's a gift.
But I've seen enough of life to understand that presence in my life is omnipresent, even when I might question not him, but to question myself.
I agree with what you're saying. I think that in my life, faith has been a gift. It doesn't mean it doesn't flag or kind of, I don't keep up with it and I don't try to feed my faith like I need to, but I've always had this love for God. And I tell people that I don't want to worship a God that I've got totally figured out. I like the idea that God is very surprising and that I don't know, even the smallest part of what God understands. And he's like about 60 steps ahead of me and waiting for me to kind of pick up my pace. But I don't want to worship a God that is somebody that I've got kind of neatly compartmentalized. I like the wonder and the shock and the awe of omnipotence and omniscience. One of the big questions I have is, how does he pull it off? There's you, there's me, there's billions of people. And I guess I have to really trust in the omnipotence of God and that he somehow has time to hear my prayer. He has time and he's all ears when you pray. And everybody, he loves all of us. I have a hard time kind of wrapping my arms around that, but the fact that I can't wrap my arms around it, I don't think should get in the way of loving God.
I'm thinking you cannot force yourself to love anyone. You can want to love someone, right? And like, as you were saying, I've had conversations with people like yourself. I go, why do I have this innate feeling? Why do I have this innate trust? I don't know. And I don't know why. I'm happy I have it, right? And I don't know why another person has to struggle so, right? And maybe they're finding, as we do, no matter how much faith you have, we find ourselves through this whole process. I don't believe in this heavy-duty judgment. The older you get, the more you understand if there is a creator, right? If there is a creator, that majesty will one day be understood. But right now, I've got to use this 4-letter word, faith, right? And that's an opportunity, and that's a challenge in and of itself. And I think that we're all in that category.
Right.
But it is certainly to have that hope, right, is what is eternal.
Let me ask you this question. Is there somebody who's kind of changed the direction of your life more than you realized at the time? Have there been other people in your life that, looking back through the years, really had a really massive influence on you?
Yeah, it's hands down my father. I was blessed with a master listener.
Really?
And as a follow-up to that, or a description of that, when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this old Willys Jeep, and I never put the roof on it, right? And my buddies and I would go skiing up in the dead of winter. We'd go skiing up at Bogus in the mountains, and we'd come down at night, grab a pizza, and we'd head to the drive-in theater, right? The drive-in movie. And for those who are listening, I have no idea what a drive-in movie was. Like this vast parking lot with these big mounds, one mound after another, going towards this large screen. And we found that if we hit those bumps hard, the purpose of it was, or you drive into a drive-in movie and you'd go up one of those humps, just enough to put your car at about a 40-degree angle, and then you'd be rocked back looking at the screen, right? Then you could watch the movie. Well, we found that if we hit those bumps fast and hard enough, we could become airborne in that Jeep. We discovered even trying down by the projector booth, we try to get the image of the Jeep on the screen up there, right? So, as I say, it was the dead of winter, and this beautiful girl in my high school I'd always wanted to date, but she had a boyfriend. His parents and he moved out of town. So I immediately asked her on a date, and luckily for me, she agreed. So I went to my father. I said, Dad, can I borrow your car for Saturday night? Obviously, I'm not going to take her to the drive-in in the open top Jeep, right? And he said, well, Sonny, he said, yes, you may, but he says, I need your word. You'll be very careful. He said, now my father drove these big Chrysler Imperials. They were tanks, the biggest cars on the road. And he said, Sonny, I have a new car on order, so they've given me a loaner. So because it's not my car, I need your word. You'll be very careful. And I said, Dad, yes, I will. So the night arrives, I pick her up. We go to the drive-in, get the tickets, drive in. All of a sudden, I see these wonderful undulating launch pads, right? And I say the fateful word to her, watch this. And I'm heading straight for one of those big humps. And of course, at the last second, I hit the brakes hard because I'm not really going to do it. Well, physics was never my best subject. And the whole front end of that huge behemoth car lifted off the ground and went boom. And I tried to act really cool about it because instead of facing the screen, we were like facing this way, right? What had happened was that the radiator belt fell off, the fan belt fell off, everything's lying on the ground. And another guy, by happen chance, another friend of mine in high school, had heard this big commotion, looked over, saw it was me, came running over. We lifted it, and we got those belts back on, right? Yeah. And that was it. Well, the following Monday, Dad comes home from work, and he said, Sonny, can I see you? And I said, sure, Pop. I walked back to his bedroom. He said, Sonny, did you have a problem with the car Saturday night? Yeah. And I said, no, Dad, I didn't. And he said, well, Sonny, I'm only going to ask you one more time. Did you have a problem with the car? I looked him right in the eye and said, no, Dad, no problem. And he said, well, that's odd because I got a bill for $150 today for that car. And I went, like that. Dad went, like that. We never talked about it. So about 3 months later, I had this opportunity to go to California on some school government thing. I don't remember what it was, but they gave us a list of rules we had to abide by, right? So I took that home. Our parents had to sign it. I went in and I said, Dad, would you sign this? I've got this chance. It's a free trip to go to California. And Dad said, well, Sonny, it says here that I have to obey to all these rules. He said, do I have your word that you'll do that? I said, yes, Dad, you do. As he looked at me, he said, good, I know you will, because you've only lied to me once in your life. Really? And it was like a spear went through my heart. We didn't talk about it then. We didn't talk about the rest of our lives.
Really?
But what I knew was that this man had listened with his heart, and he knew that I didn't lie because I was being devious or wanting to get away with something. He knew I'd lied because I'd broken a trust, the most important trust to me in the world. It was the only lie I ever had with my father.
Wow.
And yet again, and I think about the friends that I had at that point in time who, the belt would have been off and you're lying to me. And, and back in those days, my father never hit me with a belt. I had friends whose fathers did, right? Yeah. But I grew up with that lesson from him to understand that love, that empathy that he had, most people don't receive in their lives. And one other thing, I remember when my boys were going through the divorce, and my wife at the time was dating someone. And Willie, my youngest, it was a Sunday afternoon. We'd come home from church, and we dedicated that week to watching all the Rocky movies that weekend. Getting ready to watch the last Rocky movie, but they get called to the phone, and they're speaking to this fellow that was dating their mother, right? And after about 20 minutes, Willie's still out there, and I'm going, gosh, why is he still out there, right? Well, at that point in time, Willie gets off the phone, and then Jackson was so mad, my oldest son. And he was just being unmercifully unkind to his little brother. And I had every desire of me wanted to pick him up and just throw him into the room and say, how dare you talk to your brother like that? You don't come out of the room until you could be a gentleman and slam the door on. But what I knew I had to do was to go in, tell him how much I loved him. And when I held him in my arms and told him how much I loved him, he just broke down into tears. And what I learned from that was that one of the children of the other fellow, one of the older daughters, had told Jackson that there was going to be a new family and that Willie would never love him again. So here's Jackson, rightfully so upset at his little brother who was never going to love him. I just held him in my arms. I said, baby, I will never leave you. And we have both boys have this most amazing connection. And that's because I had a father who listened, who cared. It doesn't have to be a father, It might be that we haven't been listened to, but we can listen to others. But I hope that everyone does have someone who doesn't listen to fix, doesn't listen to correct. It just listens. It doesn't have a single thing to say about it.
We have a couple of things in common, Rob. And my dad was a banker. I was the oldest. He was the chief credit officer for a big bank, First Security Bank of Utah.
So Dad was the chairman CEO of the First Security Bank of Idaho.
The name sounds pretty familiar. Anyway, my dad was just this really amazing guy. But while you were describing your dad, the thought came into my mind that because he listened to you, that was a source of your confidence. Now, I mentioned to you that I'm going to ask the question of what is your superpower or your superpowers, plural, in your life? And putting false modesty aside, Rob, how would you answer that question?
I guess appreciation would be that. I guess that, but I don't see any one thing except maybe it's my ability to communicate my thoughts with someone. But I don't. When I'm able to listen to others, when I'm able to believe in myself, it's because I was taught I could believe in myself. I was given the opportunity to believe in myself and not be put down. Otherwise, I would not have that ability to believe. Or envision something and my goal, whatever it's going to become, and I'm going to get there. I don't know how, but I know I will get there, to have that kind of confidence. Growing up in my home, I knew I was not better than any other individual at all, but I also knew I was not beneath any other individual.
It's a great thing to know, isn't it? It's great to get to know you.
Likewise, and it's so fun that, there's a connection there. There's a connection there with the banking.
One of the things I admire most about Robert is that after all the business he's done and all the places he's been, what stands out most to him aren't the deals or the accomplishments. It's the people. A father who knew how to listen, a mentor who opened a door, family members who stepped in when they were needed. Ordinary people whose belief and encouragement changed the direction of his life. Maybe that's one of life's quiet truths. We rarely become who we're meant to be on our own. Someone takes a chance on us. Someone believes in us. Someone helps us see possibilities we could not yet see for ourselves. And perhaps the greatest gift we can offer in return is to become that kind of person for somebody else. If you'd like to sit down with this a little longer, there's another conversation this week about the people who quietly shape the course of our lives in ways we don't always recognize at the time. And if you'd like a place to reflect on stories like these a little longer, we've got a place for that too.
Listening is the truest form of love. When you listen to someone, you validate their life.